I've worked for a few different engineering companies where some of them, I think, on the engineering side were more customers like obsessed. Some of them, I felt like it was really hard. I felt like disconnected, I guess, on the engineering team from the customer. Like we would never talk about it. What are some of the ways to bring that customer obsession culture into an engineering org when sometimes it's like engineering is like, yeah, just go build this thing. But do
Yeah.
you have any like tricks that you use or when we can bring it into the life cycle for engineering?
Yeah, so I think there are two parts to your question, Dan. One is, how do you weave some of this customer obsession into various stages of the development? And the
Yeah.
second part is, what are the more specific ways when the customer or the user for that scenario is not directly, mapped to the persona that a engineer can relate? So let me go into the first part. So I think customer obsession should be embedded from ideation all the way to post launch. Sometimes people just think, oh, PM has to do that customer at the start and then we forget about it. No, this is weaving it at every base. It means using customer feedback to refine ideas and validate solutions at each stage of the product development lifecycle. What does that mean? So let's go into kind of, some of the phases and what are some of
Yeah.
those levels that I have seen and that my teams have seen to keep in mind. During the research phase, right? Identifying the target persona and customer and defining the problem is important. That time, you want to talk to the customer with the intent to understand the problem and its impact. Next one is the requirement phase where we are defining the what, defining the KPIs. And at this stage, talking to the customer with the intent to validate the problem, its prioritization, and its measure of success. The third phase, which is the design phase, prototyping the solutions for the problem. During this stage, you want to talk to the customer with the intent to validate the ideas, prototype, validate the hypothesis. The sooner you can get this feedback, the more your ideas can be adopted in more faster iterations with least investment. And the fourth phase is the implementation phase when you're talking to the customer with the intent to validate the solution. And the post launch phase is ensuring that your quantitative and qualitative KPIs are being met with the specific persona, but also outside of that specific persona, because now your outreach is much broader. So you might see some of the patterns that were not visible when you were looking at a small segment. And so shadowing the customer to learn whether it's being used the way it was intended, what are the new problems that are surfacing, as well as how is the discovery coming about? Is that intuitive? I know while at Microsoft, we would have a customer ask coming through for feature request. And this was, I think, for Office Product Suite. And then you won't believe 90% plus of those feature asks were already in the product. But the challenge was the discovering for people to discover and use it. And so it's not that you've just built the feature and that's done. It's how intuitive it is to discover and drive the adoption.